Welcome back to our latest Value Bite. I'm excited to jump into a really, I think, unique topic because it's something that we don't talk about that often, enterprise value. But before we get some insights and expertise, Rick, I am so grateful for you coming on and giving us a little bit of your time, letting us pick your brain. But share with us a little bit more about you, your business, and how you help organizations and owners.
Yeah. So, Rick Cazenave, thanks, Randy, for having me. I am over 30 years in process manufacturing. Without getting, it's not assembly, it's process. So paper, chemicals, packaging, converting, those kind of things. I've done basically about every function short of being in HR, although I've done HR things, and IT, done a lot of IT things, but not in IT, and finance. But I've run P&L in those businesses for the last 15 years. So anywhere from about 200 million to near a billion globally, but for public and private entities and stuff. And so today, what I do is I help companies really on a order to cash basis, so the full breadth of those businesses and looking at their strategies and their execution plans to figure out what ways to improve the P&L. But in the context of this conversation, how that translates to enterprise value.
So, before we go a little bit deeper, let's do a quick definition.
Yeah.
So, how do you define enterprise value?
Okay. In the simplest terms, it's what's your company worth to someone else. And so the one of the challenges is a lot of us work with private companies. Of course, they're priceless to them. But when you get to the point where you have to sell it or carve out a piece or whatever, it is what is the market going to pay for that? Now, values in the eye of the beholder, it will vary by buyers, but not a tremendous amount. And particularly where I come from, manufacturing, process manufacturing, it varies very little. Okay. And so it will be driven by components, which we're going to kind of get into, but it's kind of a basic math equation
Mhm.
that's linked to market outlook and what do you believe and certain things like that.
So I think that really goes into when you look at your experience, obviously in the process manufacturing world, but also just in the B2B world as a whole. What would you say are some of those primary drivers?
Well, the first thing is that it's net value for you, right? How much value you making through your transactions, whether it's a service or a product. Okay. The interesting thing for all of us that operate in B2B, I mean B2B, is that whether you can see it or capture it, it is a rare thing where you're not selling on some sort of measurable value.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's the challenge. Now, listen, you may pick your cell phone. You can't argue that it has more utility than the other brand. You just like that brand. Okay. That's consumer spending. And we call that illogical buying. There's very little illogical buying in the B2B space. You may not see all the value drivers, and that's why you don't understand why behavior is happening, but typically it's driven by something. And that also translates to, of course, the value back to the topic, right? The enterprise value of things is what's your company worth? What's the enterprise worth? What would someone pay for it if you were to sell it? That kind of thing is like, less emotion in that space.
Mm.
Unfortunately, on the sales side, if you're a private person, there's a lot of emotion.
Right, right.
But on the buyer side, that's not how that works, right? They don't function that way. And so it's important to understand that, particularly for private, the work that you do and the work that I do, is trying to get people to separate. It's like, you know, you have to not be emotional about this. You need to be grounded in the numbers, and numbers will drive the day.
Mm. So I think, thinking about it's a requirement that you have to look at this whether or not you want to. It's just a matter of, are you being strategic? Are you being reactionary? Are you missing out on opportunities? And so with that in mind, with your experience and working with organizations, what role does this end up playing in strategic planning? So, what does this look like when you come to the table and you start to map out, okay, here's where we're going, here's our formalized strategic plan?
Right. So let's get to the nuts and bolts of what enterprise value is. Enterprise value in manufacturing is last 12 months EBITDA. Okay. There can be some negotiation, slight adjustments to that EBITDA, okay? Plus the next 12 months forecast, short to intermediate term, plus your 5-year plan, and they'll take into account market, compounded, I got to be careful about acronyms, compounded annual growth rates, things like that, competitive space, something else. And then the other component, which drives a multiple to that last 12 months EBITDA, is basically EBITDA percent and some cash metrics like, is your cash conversion cycle short or is it long? Because that's a kind of a function of risk. So what you've got is you got EBITDA last 12 months, some market things and all that kind of stuff for the strategic view. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have your EBITDA percent. Well, there's also a trend on EBITDA percent. Um, if your EBITDA percent's been dropping, then there's an effect on the multiple. Your revenue's growing, but your EBITDA percent's shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a lot of factors that are in there. And remember, again, when you sell something, someone's hoping to make more money at it, and they're going to pay you a premium for that. They're looking for the groundwork that you've laid in that business that would argue that this business is going to be worth more when they get done with it. But past performance isn't a predictor of future, but it is something worth looking at. So that's kind of the thing, how you've run the business, how you've positioned it, what's been the general trends and things like that, and understanding what impact those will have on that multiple. Can't fudge your EBITDA very much the last
Mm-hmm.
12 months.
Mm-hmm.
But the multiples where the money's made. And so if you think about it, if you agree that your EBITDA is $10 million, okay? A move of a multiple of 2, because your EBITDA percent, there's a battle over the EBITDA percent, and you're going to go from a specialty multiple,
Mm-hmm.
okay, which might be even double digits, but then we'll use 10. That's great. So it's a 10 multiple. So they're going to give you 100 million, you have 10
Right.
million EBITDA, they're going to give you 100 million for the company. Forget your revenue. It's that versus a 5. you know, is like, no, your EBITDA percents have been declining. You've been growing at the top line and the EBITDA line aggregate, but the premium that you're obtaining on your new business is degrading over time. Now your multiple's a 5. That's 50 million. That's a huge 100 didn't change, the multiple changed. And so it's kind of one of these things where it's like you have to consider both. All of us that have been in the world long enough have heard some finance person going, you can't spend percents, right? It's
Right.
like,
Right.
I can't eat on percents.
Right.
But they do, when you get to a transaction to sell something, they become incredibly important.
So when you are working with your clients, when you're coming in, you're helping that organization, what are some of the red flags or just what are those problems that they've identified where they're like, you know what, we really need some help and we're not sure what to do? Where do you come in? What are those pain points?
So one of them is dead revenue, right? They're showing revenue growth 5% CAGR, but I only see 1% in EBITDA. Okay, growth. What are you taking? Why are you taking it? Is this is this decline in the what I'll call is the value of each sale? Is that market? Are you somehow outside the market? What's the market driver? Is this something you're doing? Is this something being done to you? Right.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so I kind of dig into those things, but then also look, changes in landscape and panic can cause people in the short term to do things that have long-term effect. I used to have sales was 5%, SG&A, sales, development, basically the overhead for the
mm-hmm.
sales organization, okay, and admin. I used to be at 7%, I'm at 14%. Well, why are you at 14%? Well, I used to be in, 4 major markets, and now I'm in 9.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to like, why? Well, I was struggling in my 4 major markets. Okay. But what you did is you built an entire company around 4 major markets, and now you're in 9. Odds are is that at least 3 of those 5 that you picked up, you are suboptimal. And
Mm.
you did it in the short term. And listen, there's no, again, people take that as a as a castigate, just, picking on them. Like, no, you did what was necessary in the moment to run your business, but recognize that it has an impact on value to go back and sell it. So if you are 2 years, 3 years, 5 years out from selling, you have to now rectify that.
Mm-hmm. You
How
know,
do I optimize that?
so
Yep.
I really think that resonates a lot, and kind of no matter how you work with organizations or owners, that reactionary type of decision making, it happens. And
Hmm.
right, like if we could be strategic in all of our decisions, well, then you probably wouldn't need a you or a me, quite frankly,
Yeah.
right? You'd just be able to go along your way as that leadership within the organization. But so when we're working with owners, whether it's helping them create processes or scalable marketing or diversifying and utilizing marketing as a change agent, whatever that may be, we run across this idea of they've been reactionary.
Hmm.
And so, therefore, it's like, okay, now we got to look at where you are right now. And one of the ways that we've been able to integrate into our process to have more intention behind the strategies we're putting together is to really identify what the vision is of the organization, which oftentimes is integrated with like the leadership vision, the original owner's vision. If you're passing it down to be a legacy business, it's very different than if you're wanting to grow it to sell it, or whatever that looks like. And so identifying that vision and anchoring decision making in that is a way that strategy, focus, and clarity can come out. So, in your experience, how have you seen vision being a part of decision making or not being, because it's not been really addressed from a big picture level?
Yeah. On the private people that I've helped, one thing is typically they saw something. They might have been involved in the market, or they had some sort of background, or maybe they started right from the beginning, but they saw an opportunity which they dropped into, and were through force of will, dedication to the outcome, and everything, that they've been able to make this thing go. And then, of course, it's the next thing. Oh, this seems like a good idea. We'll go there. I've dealt with some of the biggest foreign multinationals that started off in things like heart of palm. And then they made cans because they didn't like buying cans. And then they were boxes and everything else. And all of a sudden they're this monster company, right? It kind of
Right,
just evolved. It is that there was no rhyme or reason or strategy to it. It was, I just don't like buying this. I'm going to make it myself. I don't like
right.
buying this. I'm going to make it myself. Um, so again, in most cases, it was a good idea executed with a lot of energy and dedication, but there wasn't any strategy even from the beginning,
Right.
right? And then they've seen opportunities to go places. And of course, the other thing is the motivation, okay, which is not a bad thing. To your point, I didn't build this company to sell it. Oh, that thought process never entered my mind. you know, is that I just thought this was a good idea, and I thought this was a good idea, and I thought this was a good. I want to provide for my family, and then my family got bigger, because the other thing is everybody that works for them is family. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, these are people who will call me and kind of go, "Hey, help me buy something. I don't want to pay taxes," which a publicly traded company would never do. And so it's their thought process on how they run their business, why they're running this, and the big thing is the why. They saw an opportunity, they saw a problem to solve, and in most cases, it wasn't motivated by money. The last thing was money,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now you're having conversations with them about money, what something's worth, and those kind of things. And so in some cases, there's an absence of strategy or vision, or there was tentatively a vision, but it was really kind of grow where it makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is no one else can follow that and everything. And so there are exceptions. There are some that were far more, focused on those kind of things. In a lot of cases, they've had other businesses, by the way. They're
Mm-hmm.
serial
Yeah,
entrepreneurs.
serial entrepreneurs. Yeah.
They tend to be more focused. They tend to actually be thinking about that kind of stuff. Folks who they only have the one, it's a different thing. So in those instances that you're talking about, it's I think you said it before. What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? It's like, what do you want? And it's like, well, and you hear words and everything. It's like, would you like this if you sold it to go on and all the people that have been part of this program, you want to make sure that they're going to be taken care of and all that kind of stuff? Is that something that you want? You have to ask that. And it's like, why? Because then that's going to have an impact on who you can
Right.
sell to, what value you're willing to take, and all that kind of stuff. What do you want? Do you want to still be a part of it? Do you not want to be a part of it? Do you want your family to be part of it? What do you want? And it's funny how many of them have never invested a thought in that, actually. They just
Absolutely.
have been going through.
Especially if, they are on this, oh, this was a good idea, this was a good idea, and they're really
Yes.
seeing success and, maybe even oftentimes kind of quick success. Because if you're going off of a good idea, it might
Yep.
grow quite
Sure.
significantly. And so I think that is something that is always so surprising in our world too, when you sit down with folks that are majorly successful, but then when you ask them, okay, well, why are you doing this? Or what do you want? It's a question they haven't been asked. And so is that something that you find yourself kind of having to spend time on the front end, really
Sure.
helping them discover and really unpack, kind of a little
Yeah,
counseling session?
people call me a lot of times when they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That everything that's worked for the last 20 or 30 years is not working and they want an idea. Now, what's interesting is how they solve problems,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is they solve problems by, oh, I think this is a good idea. I think this is a good idea. And they have good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have landed in a meeting room and someone told me what they were. Oh, we do this. And I'm like, but you don't make that. And it's like, yeah, it's like, so you're not that. No, you convert that material. Yeah, that's why you're not bankrupt like everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you're affiliated with an industry, you're not part of it. And then it's like, well, we'd like to do this, this, and this, and this. And then again, the question is you have concerns because your business is off, your volumes are off by 20 or 30%. You're in particular markets, and you're just looking for sales.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get more sales and everything like that? And we'll do those things, business
Mm-hmm.
development or whatever it is. But understand is that every one of your competitors who also have the same capability, you said it's not you, it's the market. And I verified that. It's not you, it's the market. So they're all in the same boat as you. What do you think they're doing right now? They're
Mm-hmm.
sitting in a meeting thinking about all the different places that they can go to that so can you. And then you're all talking about going into places where there's already people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of, it's like, first things first, what's the goal here? Well, we'd like to survive. You know, well, okay, now we're on the same page. And it's like, okay, well, that's not about just the top line. It's not just about finding a new market, everything else is. It's like we need to figure out a way to get more money out of what we're currently doing as well. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're back to enterprise values and EBITDAs and all those kind of things and just trying to get people to sit there. And I have the unfortunate thing sometimes of having to point out to people is that, and I've used this metaphor, I know it's a little tough, but it's like, look, you're in a knife fight. Two things you need to understand about a knife fight. One is you need to get out of it as quickly as possible. And two, everyone bleeds in a knife fight. Okay. The trick is not to die, right? And
Right.
so and so to have conversations with people, particularly private owners, to kind of sit there and go, you can't make it up to people that you might have to make tough decisions to do in the short term if you don't survive in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my space where I live, there's a lot of that going around in this environment since 2022. But even on the upside for people and things like that, they're trying to find growth. Things have stagnated or whatever, and they're looking for something else. Again, it's what do you want and what's the truth?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, you probably give me an example. Oh, we have processes. And then you look at them and kind of go, I'm not sure that's a process.
Yeah.
Squint at it, look sideways and
Yeah.
kind of go,
Like it
I'm not
seems
sure that's a
more
process.
seems more like maybe an idea. My favorite too is, and I don't know if you run into this, but it's like, oh yeah, we have a process, and then you talk about it, but they're not doing it. It's like,
No,
well,
well, they're
that's
not,
not a
yeah, not
process.
doing, well, this is our process, except,
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 except, yeah.
except, except, and
Uh,
then of course with your owners, right? Then what you find out is that the process is we get to stage two in the process and then we go back to the owner.
It's not a process. I mean, it is a process, but it's not what you think it is.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I think one of the things that really rises to the top when you're talking is just that change, right? Like there's been
Yes.
so much change
Right.
within the organization from start to where they're at now, change in how they're doing things, how they have to do them now. And so when you come
Right.
in, you're really having to help them figure out not just what
Yes.
changes need to happen, but how to make them along the way. So
Mhm.
is there a story or, a client that comes to mind where you were really able to come in, you
Mhm.
identified those changes, and although it was challenging, they saw and you saw this improved trajectory and it was able to
Right.
change the long game?
Yeah, so I have one that is still surviving. I mean, challenged, but was brought in initially, again, about the top line and this and everything else. And we had 15 or 20 of those, but immediately started looking at their team and like who can do what
Mm-hmm.
and how they were doing things. So I'm an order to cash guy. I don't care where it comes from, if it's ops, if it's whatever. And so, pointing out, hey, um, you know, your sales force. Is it a sales force or is it all customer service? Like, what do you mean? It's like, I don't see evidence that you actually have a sales force.
Mm-hmm.
I see evidence that you have enhanced customer service. And it's like, and that's okay.
Yeah,
I mean, but you need to understand that there's a difference between someone who's actually going out and making sales and people who are taking care of your existing customers.
right. Business
Okay.
development and account management are not the same.
Yeah, they're not. And the thing is, it's not to say that there's not value in there, but you need to be careful in thinking that you have that. To point out to people, it's like, hey, this individual needs to be plucked from where they are and placed here. Why? Because in looking at in the entirety of the talent pool, forget experience for a minute, is that this person kind of gets it, and they would be better served and can still do some other functions, but this person you can get a multiple out of that's higher than the current multiple they're generating, which is to the benefit of the company. So that kind of stuff. And then, on this one instance, I said, you cannot continue to present yourself in the market to your customers, call it lead times or your turnaround times and things like that. You can't afford that anymore. Can't be just in time, can't be 2 week turns, can't do those things because you don't have the critical mass and demand now to cover all those costs. You need to focus your hourly staffing. And I'm like, some people are going to be out for a while. Survive,
Mm-hmm.
survive. And
Mm-hmm.
then I went as far with them as to coordinate with legally, because they also didn't have this background, right? Us, who in your competitors, because there's only 8 of them, 7, 8, who's in worse shape than you? Okay. And we, with all the antitrust stuff, is there not JVs, not because that takes time. Are there some sort of commercial arrangements we have where we can give up something that we're still doing, but is net not generating any benefit to us, but something we can grab from them,
Mm-hmm.
all legally and stuff, toll, whatever it is. But guys, when you're in a knife fight, you turn over every rock
Mm-hmm.
and you do what you have to do, and they're still surviving. But my big thing was to also hand it off to them. It's like understand where you are, understand how you need to operate, understand where you need to focus, and that you'd like to do things that you can't control,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, and then you should be doing the things you can control. And so I think that's the key. So again, I'm typically not called when things are great.
Right.
Um,
Right.
or they're underperforming, and so it's not always a life and death situation, but some when they're underperforming,
Mm-hmm.
and I ask stupid questions. So
Great example
but
of how there's no stupid question, especially when you're trying to really dig deep and turn over those rocks. And I think one of the things that, not to oversimplify, obviously, it's very complex when you're going in and trying to turn over all those rocks. But one thing that stood out is that it's not necessarily just about what you need to do or what you're going to do. It's really going into deeper of what do you need not to do? What is it that we don't need to do anymore? Which there's a part of me that almost wonders when we run into businesses, every owner is different, every leadership organization team's different, but sometimes it's harder to give up those things than it is to start something new, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, this is the way we've always done it. Why would we? This works. But it's like, well, it goes back to that process. Does it?
What is it? What's the expression? Correlation doesn't mean causation, right?
Oh, exactly.
Well,
Yes.
things got better when I put this in, and it's like
Right.
I cannot draw a direct line to any value for this.
Right. Right.
And
Perception is not always reality.
well, and now it's back to now it's back to the original topic, the enterprise value piece. Look, we can believe whatever we want,
Mm-hmm.
but if I can't trace value either indirectly or directly back to that enterprise value, then it's like you have to question those things.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, if you ever heard somebody say that we have higher quality than the other people? You ever heard somebody say we make higher quality?
Yes.
And then you look at their prices in the market and you notice they're not higher prices. English language is a tough thing. We use quality to denote performance. It's almost synonymous, right? But when you put dollars to it, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
You're producing more quality or performance than the market will pay for. And
Mm.
so, what is that costing you? And that's all over the globe, by the way. You hear that from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like normally they're synonymous, but they're not always synonymous, right? And when you're talking about enterprise value, trying to help people make more money or to generate value, like the process that you can't figure out how it's generating any value, it's like, well, people like it. Is that making them buy anything? You
Mm-hmm.
know?
Right.
And so those are tough questions for people because they thought it was a good idea. Listen, I had thousands of ideas and I thought they were all great, but in retrospect, not all of them were.
That's
You know?
fair. That's fair. Well, before we close out here, I wanted to pose a question of, obviously diving into enterprise value, kind of coming in, helping organizations figure out what makes sense is not something that happens in one day, 1 hour,
Yeah,
or 1 20-minute video podcast here.
yeah.
But if there was one piece of advice that you would give to leaders as they are embarking on this journey, trying to understand leveraging enterprise value to drive that success, what would be that one piece of advice?
Um, the cohesiveness and collective dedication to the task of the organization, regardless of what level the people are at. We use the word change a lot, right? You talked about change. I tell people change is not hard. Is the change is only hard when you've not clearly defined the objective. And my
Mm-hmm.
metaphor is always, you crest the hill on the highway and you can see the traffic's backed up for like ever, and there's a ramp, and you would normally go that way. You don't even think about it because you got to get somewhere, and you go off the ramp. You're not exactly sure where you're going necessarily. You got your GPS and everything else, but you have abandoned your path. That's change
Mm-hmm.
because the path is not what's important. It's the destination that's important. If you don't get everybody on page in your organization where they understand it, where they can say it back to you in whatever words make sense to them, then you're going to have people in an organization that are either not, rowing their oar, or worse, while you're doing
Oh,
this, and
yes. Yeah.
and you're like, why are we not getting anywhere?
Yes.
Because they've decided, or they've either interpreted it wrong, or they even just rejected it. And so, you have to articulate it, get there, and everything else, because even in smaller organizations, it doesn't take a whole lot of that
Mm-hmm.
to make all your efforts ineffectual. You know what to do, you know where to go, you know what it is, and you didn't teach it to anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and they are not getting it. And so, I would say that more than anything. In anything you're trying to overcome something, or you're trying to make some sort of pivot or optimization or whatever, if they don't understand why, they can't explain why and everything else, and take the time. Oh, by the way, saying it slower and louder, that's the other problem. Is it's like if they didn't get it when you said it the first time, and then the second time slower and louder they didn't get it, You're going to have to figure it out a different way to communicate it.
Right. It may not be them. It
Yeah.
may be it might be the message. It might be the delivery. It
Yeah.
might just be the whole solution that you're presenting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if someone wanted to connect with you, learn more about how they could tap into your expertise for getting everybody on board and starting to go down the journey of enterprise value, as well as see these other areas that you can really bring in your expertise, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, so have a website like everybody does. I wouldn't say it's the greatest of websites. It's compassbfm.com because that's it's business fractional management is it's for
Perfect.
manufacturing. The company has, and I do on LinkedIn, right? Obviously, you don't find a bunch of them. My son's Rick Cazenave, so he's also on LinkedIn, but you can tell the
Oh,
difference.
perfect.
But you can find it there. I also do stuff on Substack. Some of it has a bit of a paywall, but not all of it. The summaries, everything else. I do global. It is U.S. centric, but strong centricity on U.S., but it is global. I do general manufacturing market updates every month, which is more of the marketing aspect in terms of value chains, everything like that, to give people an idea of what's going on. And then, of course, on LinkedIn as well. Like I said, is I benefit from the uniqueness of my last name.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I definitely think going in and learning more about those market updates that you're providing makes sense no matter if you're in the process manufacturing or, other sector. It's all things that when you're talking about change and growth and looking
Mhm.
at your business, I'm sure there's some hot takes that everyone could pull out and think through. So
Try.
well, Rick, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for popping into our value bite, and we'll look forward to hearing more in one of your future market updates.
All right. Thanks, Randy.